Hi friends! Today's video is going to be a little bit different. We're not doing editing, we're not going behind the scenes, but we are going to be talking about something really important that I don't think is being addressed enough, and that is the well-being and safety of our dog models, which should be our #1 priority. And I've been having a lot of thoughts about this lately, ever since Journey's injury back in July, basically. And I want to share some of the things that I've been learning, some of my thoughts, some of the things I'm noticing, and give you guys a great resource for if you want to learn more about how to make sure that your dog models, whether it's your own dog or your client's dog, are really as safe as possible, not just mentally, because I think that that is something that we are considering as photographers, but also physically. Let's get into it. To be clear and to begin with, I am obviously not a vet or a physiotherapist. I'm not in the health field, but I have been speaking with Journey's physio rehab fitness guy for months and months now. We have had a lot of discussions, and I am getting him in to come be a guest speaker. So if you want to learn more about this topic, that's where you can look. But these are just my thoughts and observations. I'm also not wanting to be judging anybody with this video, because all of the things that I'm going to be talking about are things that I've done myself, things that I've noticed, things that I could step in and intervene with maybe earlier than I have. I do think it's a learning process, and I definitely don't want to shame anybody for doing any of these things. It is one of those things where when you know better, you do better. So come into this with an open mind and not being defensive, because I do not think that any of us who are taking photos of dogs want to inadvertently injure them or cause them discomfort or cause them to go home feeling sore and fatigued. So that is my little disclaimer before we get started, because my perspective on working dogs and dog fitness and dog injuries and dog fatigue and all of those things has really changed over the last few months. So let's talk about some of the issues that I've been seeing. One of the first things, and the thing that kind of really inspired me to make this video, was seeing somebody jumping puppies over logs for photos. The argument might be made that maybe they only jumped this puppy once and they got the perfect photo first try, which is lovely for them, but doesn't happen always in reality. And I know I am definitely guilty of wanting to get the perfect shot, not of puppies jumping logs. I have never jumped puppies over logs for photos, and I never would, because their growth plates are still developing. They are squishy, they are clumsy, and I would really rather not do lasting damage to puppies for the sake of a photo. And I would be afraid that if my followers saw a photo of a puppy jumping a log from me, that would be kind of implicit permission that it was okay to do that, without knowing that maybe it had only taken one photo to get that perfect shot, and then they might jump that puppy over that log 20 times until it's basically a broken wreck, and that can really have lasting effects into the puppy's life, and I would just rather not. Puppies love to jump stuff, right? They're jumping on and off furniture. They really shouldn't be. That's a whole other topic, but it's kind of one of those things where just because they can do something, or maybe they love doing something, should they be doing that thing? Not necessarily. So there are a lot of guidelines around about puppy activity levels, what is safe and appropriate for puppies. If in doubt, ask your vet or your puppy's physio or whatever healthcare professional you have available to you. But really, I would, please don't jump puppies over logs. For me, it's really just not worth it, especially when I can get photos of puppies running naturally. You know, have them run along a path a couple of times. That's going to be way less stress on their joints. But basically, with puppies, avoid any kind of repetitive movements. The next thing is thinking about physical fatigue, and this was really something that was brought home to me and brought to my attention after Journey's injury, when we would notice how he would offload one or the other of his hind legs. Basically, he wouldn't put his full weight on one of those hind legs, and that is usually a pretty good indication for us that he's feeling a little bit fatigued. That doesn't mean he's injured or that he's going to be injured, but he might go home and have muscle soreness. He might wake up sore the next day, those kinds of things. I do think that we need to be more conscious of subtle signs of fatigue Maybe that is a dog that is asked to pose with its front feet on a stump or something, and then suddenly it starts getting reluctant to do that. I recently worked with a dog who has a spine problem. I think we asked him to pose with his front feet on a kind of small stump, maybe 3 or 4 times. And then we noticed he was sort of starting to struggle with that a little bit. And we said, okay, that's fine. We'll do something else. I would not be pushing that dog more than that in order to get the perfect shot. I would adjust and adapt what I'm doing in order to make sure that it is safe and comfortable, and that it isn't going to be going home with a sore back or sore hind legs from being asked to pose in that position. Doing any kind of repetitive behavior over and over again in order to get the perfect shot is in general problematic, unless that dog really is conditioned for that repetitive behavior. That can be jumping logs, it can be jumping up on their hind leg, even doing like a sit pretty a number of times. Anything that's sort of repetitive that you're asking them to do again and again should be approached with caution and looking out for signs of fatigue. And there are a lot of ways that those can show up, both subtly and less subtly. And obviously, if they're getting to the point where they look like they're really struggling and or they're refusing to do it, you're probably past the point of those more subtle signs of fatigue. Things like even just standing up on or balancing on stumps, small stumps, narrow stumps, or particularly slippery ones. Those things are all going to tire them out as well. I recently saw a couple of examples of fatigue showing up. One being a large dog that was asked to jump up on its hind legs, you know, for that kind of like standing up on 2 legs sort of trick where they're kind of like launching forward. I saw this dog getting asked to do this many times until it was really struggling to get itself off the ground. I wasn't necessarily able to intervene in this situation at that point in time, but we did eventually. For me, it had already gone on for too long, and I would have stopped it earlier before it started not really being able to get off the ground anymore, because that is a recipe for a knee injury, according to Frey. So that is definitely one to be very careful of, unless the dog is conditioned for that. And another situation that I saw recently was a dog that had been posing for a little while already and was asked to then sit on a stump, and it was basically kind of melting off the stump. We tried to get it on there a couple of times, at which point I was like, nope, let's give the dog a break now. The owner really wanted to get these photos on this stump. It was being seen as disobedience. For me, it was just this dog was very tired and needed a break at that point. So I really had to intervene and advocate for that dog. It wasn't disobedience, but it really could have been read that way as a dog that was no longer wanting to cooperate in this situation. It would get on the stump, it would kind of like get off the stump. To me, it just looked very tired. Another thing that's worth looking out for is how your dog holds their body. So for example, I went for a walk this morning. We weren't planning on doing photos, but if we had been, I probably would have left Loki out of it. You can see here on this photo that his back is quite rounded and roached, which is a sign that he is experiencing a bit of back pain today. If I had asked him to pose a lot with his front paws up, putting more pressure on his back and his hind end, or if I'd done things like asking him to jump a log at this point in time, that could have ended up with him going home quite sore. It could have made the back issue worse. It could have transferred to somewhere else because he was compensating through his back and he was all squished up in his back and very tense. There could have potentially been a lot of issues had I decided to use him as a model today. Luckily, we did a nice gentle walk, which helped loosen up his little back muscles, and he will get some treatment tonight and later in the week as well. For me, being able to see the signs of, okay, today he's a bit sore, or today he's not putting weight on his right leg quite as much as he should be, so I just need to be a little bit careful and conscious of giving him more breaks. For me, that is really important information, so I can keep him as comfortable as possible without pushing him. Because I know him. You know, if you have any kind of working dog or dog who enjoys work or modeling, you'll know, like, they'll just work through discomfort. They don't care. They're like, yay, we're working. They're not going to tell us when they are feeling tired. They're only going to tell us when it gets so bad that they just can't do it anymore and they have to lie down, or they're lame, or, you know, they're roaching their back so badly because their back muscles are all tightened up. they're not gonna probably opt out unless they're really, really done. And at that point, it's kind of too late. We spend a lot of time learning about editing, about color theory, about composition, about what lenses to get, and then we don't put that. I've never seen anybody talking about a dog's physical safety and well-being in the pet photography space, which is why I'm so excited about the talk on Sunday. Because although Frey and I have been talking a lot, I think that there's still going to be a heap of great information there. So if you want to come along to that, definitely do. He's going to give a lot more specific information than I just did. Hopefully this will give you kind of a starting point to investigate further so that we can make sure that we're doing the very best for our dog models as much as we can. So if you found this interesting, you can come along to the guest talk. It is going to be Sunday, March 30th at 8 p.m. German time. The recording will be available. Even if you're seeing this after that date, you can still sign up and come along. It is available in the Learning Journey membership, which is currently closed at the moment. The doors are only open twice a year, but it is part of the membership. So if you're thinking of joining up, it will be included in there as well, obviously, as well as all of our other guest talks and fun stuff. But yeah, definitely start thinking about the dog's well-being beyond, oh, this dog is lame, we should probably stop, because at that point I think we're probably going too far, and there is a lot of other considerations before that point. So if you're curious, come along to the talk, and otherwise drop your comments and questions below and maybe I can bug Frey to answer them. And thanks for listening. I hope this is giving you some things to think about, because I do think this is a really important topic, and I think we should really be trying to do the best by our dogs as much as we can. And that starts with us knowing that maybe there's things that we don't know or that we could be doing better.